Ace redirected his fist to his left. Sorry, but I don't like playing with someone who hits like a truck. You threw another punch to her eye. He didn't impact the organ directly, but it managed to score a hit just above the socket. Strong Suit hissed in pain as she held the spot. A red mark started to form around the affected area. Cheap shot, Stinkin'. You took a couple of bullets like it was nothing. What did you expect? Ace retorted. The brunette yelled as she charged at him again, with Ace pulling the same trick as he did before. Whatever, he didn't expect for Strong Suit to stop herself short and lunge at him just as he turned to face her. She slammed into him in a way that resembled a football player intercepting the receiver. The two had rolled onto the floor for a few seconds before Strong pinned him to the ground with a hand to his chest. Ace tried to pry it off as the teen raised a fist and started punching at his head. Ace then cocked his head left to right to avoid the incoming blows, growing a bit unnerved each time the suit's first hit to the ground inches from his face and his head. Strong Suit growled before correcting her arm, sending him right towards the boy's mouth. Winding his eyes, Ace removed his hands from Lynn's arm and fought to keep her fist high up. Unexpected for Suit, Ace then twisted her hand in the direction not supposed to turn, making her yelp in pain. Grabbing her shirt collar, Ace then pulled his sister to the right, making her roll until she was on her stomach. Then she started trying to get to her feet, but Ace was quicker and jumped onto her back. Pressing his knees against her spine, he grabbed her arms and started bending them, increasing the pressure with each second. Ace grunted as Strong Suit shifted beneath him, trying to escape his grasp. Give up, Strong Suit. I don't want to hurt you more than I need to. That's funny, Suit grunted, kicking her legs a bit and tried to buck him off. You tried choking out High Card earlier. She was about to kill Willie. I couldn't sit by and watch her do something like this. All swore we never do. And that's why you're an idiot for refusing to change? With her anger fueling her strength, Suit flipped herself over to Ace on her back. She slid something along the floor, grind behind her brother out of position. But in spite of the burns he was starting to feel, Ace then held on to like his life depends on it. The teen then continued her assault until she accidentally rammed them headfirst into the base of the support beam. Both kids were dazed for a moment, but thanks to Lynn's fixed call, she came to her senses quicker, feeling her brother's grasp slacken. She then whistled herself out of hold before glaring down at the dazed boy. Ace's vision had blurred out after receiving that impact to his head, but it sharpened rather quick when she gave that hand and closed around his windpipe. Staring back at those yellowish eyes, Ace could barely get a word of Strong Suit started ramming him into the floor. Each time his body impacted with the ground, the boy Suit felt ever so slightly tighten his grip she had on his neck. That pressure was lifted almost immediately when Suit threw him hard to the floor, only to smash her feet squarely on his stomach. Ace wheezed heavily as his cries were near silent due to fighting to get oxygen into his lungs. He tried to stand, but it seemed that Strong Suit was done playing games. Straddling his stomach, he proceeded to beat him down, landing a couple of large blows to his face and chest. The 11-year-old tried to shield himself from his arms, but this resulted in the result of nearly fracturing them both. All too familiar sensation of fear began to grip on the young boy as he effectively lost his fight, and he didn't have any chance to call for help. Despite his other allies in the building, Ace's assistant resonance slowly faded till his cries became louder with each savage blow Strong Suit had dealt with him. But please, stop! Ace begged, before taking another hit to the nose. Crying will get you nowhere, Strong Suit retorted, before landing a hard blow directly to his eye. Ace screamed loudly as he swore he felt his eye practically explode in their socket. His screams ceased as Suit landed a few more hits to his teeth and temple. Before she smashed in two fists into his chest, Ace gagged a bit as he felt his ribs break on impact, feeling something foreign enter his lungs as he drew into the air in them. Given a few pants, Strong Suit then stood up and kicked the boy into the stomach. Ace coughed violently as he spat out fresh blood along with some sort of teeth. He then shifted his body against his aching arms in an attempt to sit up, but he could only move a few inches before he felt like he couldn't push himself anymore. The 11-year-old let out a gasp as Strong Suit grabbed him by the back of his neck, only to cough even further due to drawing blood in his lungs. The athletic hero checked over her brother as he hung limp in her hand, which was a tad bloody because of the cut hitting Ace's teeth. Damaging his suit was minimum, but his face was marred with bruises and specks of blood. His nose was slightly crumpled, yet one eye shut due to him nearly being punched out with tears leaking out of the other. The blood was continuously leaking from his mouth due to a combination of missing teeth as well as forcing out internal bleeding. You know you look like a lot that way when you did say the day we beat you in the paste. Suit then looked down, except without your arms being broken, but knowing you might come up with another stupid plan to get back at us. She tightened her hand into a fist. So how about I just cut off the middleman and get rid of you right there, right now? After all, you were always a failure as a leader and hero. The teen then cocked her fist back with an evil grin and from her face. Her arm muscles tensed up for the last punch. Any last words, Stinkin'? Ace's body convulsed a bit as he gave out choked sobs. Normally he would have brushed out the comments about him being a failure as his duty as being a hero, but the evidence stacked up against him was so strong that it was impossible to ignore. Failing to capture the bad guy was one thing, but the Full House practically abandoned him and Lily over it, and in spite of gathering up new allies to try and even the odds in hopes that something works out with his older sisters that blew up in his face, all it did was let another villain get away with it and put all of Ace's friends in danger. Even they may not forgive him due to his poor choices, leaving the white-haired boy to fend for himself. The thought of being alone, feeling that primarily responsible for everything, that occurred that bored into the boy's psyche, eliminating any willpower to put up was now considered pointless fight. "Lynn, please," Ace choked out in a begging tone, weakening, grasping at the wrist with his hand. "Please, don't do it." "Why shouldn't I?" Suit let it out or ease grip and let him talk. Ace let out another cough, getting some more blood out from the girl's wrist. "You were right." Suit then raised a brow, lowering her fist bit. "But what? You were, and our other sisters were right." Ace sniffled, shutting his good eye as more tears started to fall from his face. I failed you as a leader, and I got my other friends in trouble for something I thought it was worth fighting for." His mouth quivered. "I probably almost got them killed tonight because of me." Ace paused as he choked a bit another sob. I even managed to get Lily roped into all this." His tone began to change from being solemn to frantic. But I don't want to die. I don't want to go like Mom and Dad did. I couldn't think of anything to do that but because I'm always reminding me of them." His body shook as more sobs left. "But I don't want to hurt you guys. But I couldn't think of a way to avoid this." "Go ahead and finish him anyway. He's not worth nothing to you now. After all, he admitted it was his fault," spoke a voice that sounded much unlike Lynn's own voice. It repeated this phrase as the tomboy continued holding her fist at the ready, debating whether or not just ignore Ace's pleas to finish the job. However, the longer Lynn stared at the broken child in front of her, the more she was reminded of the time that she was with Lincoln, just a day before the mass shooting. There had never been any other day like before now. Lynn had seen her brother so broken and lost. Physically, of course, he was okay. Mentally, Lynn may not understand the true pain Lincoln felt outside of the fact that they were now orphans. But unlike her brother, Lynn was separated from the sight of watching your own caretakers being killed. None of the Louds were ever the same since, but Lynn knew her brother had changed the most. He was more reclusive, barely talked, and just lacked any energy to do much of anything. As corny as it sounded, he was effectively worse than a vision of Lucy, and she was more closer to a sibling due to the mental pain from being too much to bear. All the girls tried their best to get Lincoln back onto his feet, but none of them even tried more than Lynn did. Call her stubborn, competitive, or whatever you want, but that girl had a big heart on her shoulder, and it was just in the right place. In a way, you could say that she was probably more motherly towards Lincoln through his depression than Lori and Lenny were. This dialed back to the sibling levels where Lincoln appeared to be getting better, which also happened to be the first time he stopped the crime from happening before becoming ace-savvy. But that feeling usually remained. Lynn lowered her fist completely as she sat up, and her voice in her head, it was surely tossed out. She lowered Lincoln back to the floor, who didn't have the energy to stand as he collapsed. He instinctively curled up in tears as blood stained the floor. All Lynn could do now was watch the yellowish tint in her eyes completely vanish, giving to her normal hazel color. As the 13-year-old wanted to scoop up her brother and tell him that it was going to be okay, her feet were frozen on the spot. She couldn't believe what he had just said beat him to the floor, then salted the wounds even further by telling him that he was a total failure since that one day. Yet the proof was still lying at her feet, crying out to the world that probably would think he'd be better off alone. As the guilt started to become much to bear, Lynn felt something she had to do. Lincoln, The teen then squeezed her eyes tight as multiple explosions went off parts of the factory. Turns out the compressor was leaking highly flammable air, which had spread to most of the factory. Both kids watched in horror as the flames quickly began to spread, consuming anything in sight. Unlike most of the fights that occurred that night, only one between Deuce and Card Counter felt more classic, being a sibling fight, than a serious bare-knuckle brawl. Lots of hair-pulling, arm-biting were involved, but as the two became nothing more than a couple of young kids having what would normally be a childish spat, Deuce then tried to seize her multiple advantages, giving Card Counter a wedge once she and her hard noogie. Before the prodigy chose to get loose by biting the arm, the 4-year-old used the definition of brains over brawn quite well. Even with Deuce managed to pin her down, Counter always managed to break free, going for a cheap shot. Currently, Card Counter was slapping Deuce's face with her tiny hands, while the 7-year-old tried to keep a hold of her. Deuce growled before gripping the child's hands, holding them down only for the little genius to spit in her eyes. The blonde shrieked in disgust, dropping Card Counter to wipe her eyes clean. Upon opening them, her vision was covered with once more of Card Counters latched onto her face, started beating her like a head drum. Deuce gave muffled screams as she stumbled upon the catwalk, pulling on the back of Card Counter's costume to try and pry her off. Along the way, she stumbled over her launcher, being forced to grab one of the handrails before she completely fell over. Deuce gave one last scream as she grabbed the 4-year-old by the waist before tearing her off finally. She cringed a bit due to Counter pulling some of her hair before throwing several feet away. Card Counter grumbled as she tumbled down the pathway, managing to get on land on her feet, but due to being disoriented and tripping over something, her glasses set askew onto her head, but she still was able to catch what was on her foot, her Tesla gun. Shaking her head, Card Counter fixed her glasses before scrambling to her weapon, sending it to the medium. The 4-year-old aimed her weapon at Deuce, only to find the Rocketeer lining up the shot with her launcher. No one knew who pulled the trigger first, but a gas-filled rocket and an arch of electricity were flying towards each other. They had collided with the middle, with the electricity enveloping the rocket and forcing its warhead to detonate prematurely. A massive cloud of gas consumed both girls, making them gag for fresh air as fresh tears filled their eyes. Card Counter stumbled about, coughing as she ran the opposite direction before disappearing from Deuce's sight. The blonde frantically fished her for a mask, strapping it on, letting the filters do their work. The 7-year-old then took several deep breaths before she leaned against the railing. "So, that's what those things smelled like?" Deuce panted, "and I thought my diapers were bad." Suddenly the loud explosion rocked the entire building, forcing Deuce to grab the railing for dear life. 2 more explosions went off before the alarm fire blared. Looking down, Deuce's eyes widened as she could see various parts of the floor on fire. Then she saw part of the catwalk she was on, shuddered as it began to started to melt the support. Before Deuce could react, the catwalk started to give away. The 7-year-old screamed for her life as she ran to a more stable part of the floor. it beginning to disappear within her feet. The immense weight of the path began to break wherever another support stood. The rails increasingly becoming less stressed as they couldn't handle the imbalance. Just before Deuce could reach safety, the path caved beneath her feet, forcing her to grab what remained of the building. Glancing down, the 7-year-old watched as the pathway she was on disappear amongst the flaming wreckage below. She then felt the sudden grip as the rail she held onto began cracking. Unable to support her weight, giving a small cry, Deuce climbed pretty much as fast as she could, having her seconds before the rail detached itself. The blonde felt herself dip again as the rail was on its stem. Tears of fear began to leak out of her eyes as she started to think that she wouldn't make it. Just as Deuce reached the end, the rail snapped off with her fingers just inches from the edge. The poor girl screamed as she started to fall freely, only to stop abruptly when she felt someone grabbed her hand. Looking up, Deuce could see Mad Bomber struggling to pull her up. "Don't worry, I gotcha," he strained, gritting his teeth as he slowly wrestled her back to the solid ground. Once Deuce felt like she'd grabbed the edge, she scrambled onto the ground down, practically hyperventilating under her mask while clutching her chest. Deuce lifted her mask once he vented breaths out. "Oh, thanks." "Don't mention it," Bomber panted. "Okay, what the heck did you do?" The blonde glared at her partner. It wasn't me. Your sister with those crystal things shot at me, made some of my mines drop." "Queen?" Deuce groaned. She let out a gasp, escape from her upon the horrible realization. Ace Assassin, and Mirage are both down there. She then hopped to her feet. "Come on, we gotta find them." On the ground floor, Nightclub walked into a scene that most resembled as hell itself. The fires were beginning to spread quickly, incinerating anything they touched. Smoke then started to fill the air, making it difficult to see or even breathe. Behind her, Wrangler, Jack, and 8 both stood on mouths agape as instilling the chaos, with the former two looking like they had been running into a bulls that got trampled on. Just moments ago, Nightclub was just throwing down 2 boys, using her fist and occasionally her guitar would do the deed. It all stopped when they heard explosions and fire started creeping out of the windows. Any hostility between them dissipated as they grew worried for their allies. Hearing footsteps approaching, the group turned to see Card Counter leading Royal Flush past some fallen wreckage. Both girls were covered in soot and coughing violently as they fought to clear their lungs. Nightclub ran over and guided them to the door. "Dudes, what happened? I don't know. I was being attacked by birds when I managed to shoo them away, and then suddenly this whole place was on fire. I know this facility was equipped to a sprinkler system, even in the event fire occurs, but it appears to have failed for some reason," Card Counter added as she cleaned her glasses. Royal Flush's pupils shrank as she recalled a particular water pipe that busted earlier to wash some grunts away. "Right," she smiled nervously, was it trying to act natural? Nightclub, 8 counter turned their heads to the 6-year-old. "Dude, what did you do?" Flush bit her lip, knowing she couldn't lie her way out of this. Oh, okay. I didn't know that pipe that was important." Card Counter slapped her in the forehead. "We'll discuss it later. Right now, we need to evacuate the others." She paused as a large machine toppled over her. "Before this facility either collapses or worse, explodes." "Not so fast, Dudette. You guys are in no shape to get out of here." She glanced behind her. "Especially you, Free." Wrangler then looked at Nightclub as if she threw for a second head. "You expect us just to sit here and do nothing? That's our friends in there." "They ain't up to talking, man. I'm surprised if you can stand after what I did to you." Nightclub then grabbed the bottom of her shirt and tore off the large section. She then wrapped the cloth around her nose and mouth. "If I'm not going back in here for free, just get away from here as fast as you can." Before anyone else could hear a voice for approval, the musician ran into the inferno, disappearing behind the blowing smoke. 5 of the kids amongst each other turned to see if they had a better solution, especially towards Card Counter, since she had the biggest brain of the bunch. Sadly, even she was stumped, as they shared the growing blaze of each silently began to pray for a miracle. Nightclub placed her hand over her eyes, looking for past the flames to find any of the other heroes. The fires were mostly sticking to the machines and wood piles, but pieces were falling all over the place from the fallen wreckage, blocking the paths that would have been accessible. Lori? Lenny? Luann? Nightclub called over the comms, not caring what she was using her sister's names in the open. Lynn, is anyone there? Static came to an answer, making the brunette even more worried. Luna, came Lori's voice. It was nearly quiet. It sounded like she was in extreme pain. Lori, where are you? To the right of the big boiler. I have Lenny with me, but she's not waking up. Hang on, sis, I'm coming, Luna stated firmly before looking around. She spotted a two-story boiler surrounded by the flaming wreckage, and the boiler itself wasn't too looking well either. The brunette could see steam coming out parts of the sliding, and there was a noticeable bulge around its center. Luna gave an audible gulp, knowing that the thing was looking like it was going to blow from the intense heat. She then ran towards the right of the machine, sweat pouring out from her forehead as the heat was becoming increasingly uncomfortable by the second. Lori? Luna called out, twisting her head to the left frantically. Lori? Over here! Another voice called out, followed by a ravaged coughing. Luna followed the sound until she was met with a horrid sight. Lori was propped up against the concrete block, blood smeared across the front of her suit. As she handed over her abdomen, her face was paler than usual, and the way she was breathing, of how her body shook, cued Luna and how much pain she was in from feeling right now. From what Luna could see, there were bloody holes from both her lungs, and more blood seemed to pour out from under her hand. Next to her, Lenny lied on the ground unconscious, a large bruise covering her forehead with a trickle of blood running down her face. Luna ran over and kneeling next to the blonde. Well, what happened to you? Lori took a deep breath. That girl, she's really dangerous with those guns. Her hand ran to slack a bit. Luna then looked down and saw the real reason for the blood. There were at least 5 holes in her stomach. Don't worry, sis. I'll get you out of here, the musician replied, trying to fight back the tears. Lori shook her head. No, take Lenny. I literally can't move much. Luna knitted her brows together. Don't go saying that. I'll drag your butt out of here if I have to. Luna? Another voice called out. Lori looked past Luna and the other turned to spot Luann, with some boy with curly hair dressed in a tux. The tux itself was torn a bit, and the boy spotted a black eye. Otherwise, he still looked physically able. The comedian let out a gasp upon seeing the state her sisters were in. Thank God, Luna muttered. You two grab Lenny. I'll help Lori. Wait, where's everyone else? Mirage asked. 2 of your boys are outside, and so are most of my younger sisters. Luna bit her lip as more dread overcame her. But I don't know where Lola and Len are. What about Lincoln? Mirage spat as he glared the daggers at the girls. Don't you guys at least care about your brother? Or do the other sisters for that matter? Static then cut in on the receiver, but he could barely make out of the voice. On second thought, don't answer. You clearly don't after all you've done. The red-haired tapped his comms. Luann opened her mouth as she spotted an accusing finger at Mirage, but Luna cut her off. We'll settle this later. Now shut up and help. Anyone here? Mirage whispered. Please don't tell me you're still in there, Rusty, came Jack's worried voice. Wait, we're stopped using our hero names? Rusty asked as he grabbed Lenny's legs while Luann grabbed her arms. Luna helped Lori to her feet, the oldest loud giving pain cries as she moved, small amounts of blood leaking out from her injuries. That ain't gonna matter if you're a roast like a turkey, Liam shouted. Okay, that ain't gonna matter, I'm still here. The girl in the clown costume was chasing me, but all this started and... Rusty paused. Oh crap, Lily? Zach? Lincoln? We're fine, came Lily's muffled voice. Found Ronnie Ann and Lola. I think both of them fought each other to a standstill since Ronnie Ann has a shard in her leg. Lola has a bad shoulder. We looked around, but we don't know where Lincoln is, Zach added. A loud jolt of static through the line was something toppled over her, and I don't know if we have enough time to do a second check. So no one knows where either of them are? A tense silence flowed, giving Rusty this answer dreaded. Well, that's just perfect. The group heard a metallic groan, followed by some rustling open. They turned to the boiler, which now appeared to have swelled more size and had a larger stem vent coming from out of the bolt holes that kept the pipe in place. That thing looks like it's gonna blow its top. Luann shuddered nervously. Come on, let's move, Luna ordered, helping Lori limp back up in the direction she came from. But what about... Rusty started. There's no time! Go! Luann and Rusty took on one another before following the other two with haste, carrying an unconscious Lenny between them. It took them a bit longer to reach the exit since Luna's original path was blocked off by falling support that was now covered in flames. It was possibly closest to them any have experienced walking through hell. Extreme heat sucking them dry and moisture in the thick air with it. Much smoke was impossible to breathe. Falling debris and machines exploding all around. There was some more sense of bliss seeing that the others managed to make it out alive. Although it was becoming increasingly apparent as both teams did a number on each other. It couldn't overcome the sinking feeling of each one of them had, leaving a teammate to die. Despite their attempts to reach either Lynn or Lincoln over their radios, only science was there to comfort them. Fearing for the worst, no one spoke a word as they watched the flames continue consuming the factory until it was clear that they had to clear the area. There was a little doubt that the police and the fire department were already notified, especially when the faint sound of the sirens could be heard. Besides, what was there to say? They can blame each other all they want, but at the end of the day, each of them bore the same fault that occurred that night. One by one, everyone started to leave. The oldest sibling went first as Lori needed urgent care, and Lenny needed to be looked at while she was likely in comatose. Clyde and Liam had to help Ronnie Ann as she couldn't walk without support. The sharpshooter did her best to hide her tears. Even though everyone could see she was at the verge of crying, Lana could barely move as she felt as if her sole reason the fire was able to get out of control. And Lola had tugged her away from the burning building. Lisa checked Lucy's ears to see if they were fixable before tugging her along. With the emo being quieter than usual, she may not be able to hear much, but with a quick head count, she knew that everyone was feeling. The only ones that remained were Lily, Zach, and Rusty. Lily looked as if orange flames licked the top of her exit door, giving a sparing glance at the wreckage inside before staring at the ground. The 7-year-old took shaky breath before biting her lower lip. Hot tears then started leaking out of her eyes before eventually dropping to the ground. The only thing running not before her mind was that her brother strived up to do. All Lincoln wanted to do was to do what's right and preserve justice, and now he's gone because of his family's spat wrong. Not only that, one of her sisters was likely died with him. Zach then placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, only for Lily to rudely brush him off. Understandable, since it was his bombs that started the fire. The two redheads felt it was for the best to give her space. Opting her head back to the hideout, Lily sniffled, wiping the snot and tears from her face in spite of more coming out. As she started to leave. She gave one last look that would give a little become bright brother and sister at grave. That is until she spotted something came out of the flames, running towards her. Lily's mouth parted a little, rubbing her eyes to make sure she wasn't imagining things. Lincoln? But as the figure got closer, Lily's eyes widened in both surprise and relief, giving labored breaths. Lynn was hauling his ass towards the exit, carrying Lincoln in her arms as if he was a baby. Both of them had some burns covering parts of their bodies, but Lincoln looked much better off of Lynn. The headband she had was gone, her sleeves and pants were singed, and her arms were practically bathed in red. In comparison, Lincoln only had his cape missing, along with parts of his hair burned, and that's without going numerous wounds Lynn herself inflicted on him. Sadly, their escape became more complicated as the boiler near the center of the factory started to go critical, causing it no longer be able to hold back the pressure. It exploded with a deafening sound, a massive fireball taking its place as it blew at the top of the roof of several other support structures it surrounded. Lily stumbled back as the shock wave hit her, with the sound attracting the attention of others. Upon noticing the two missing Laos, they immediately about-faced and ran back for help. Lynn momentarily fell to her knees immediately after the blast. making sure she didn't drop her brother before breaking into another sprint. Sections of the roof were starting to come down now, forcing Lynn to constantly change directions when a massive piece blocked her path. Once she was 70 yards away from the exit, Lynn pushed herself off to her limits, growling in frustration in spite of her tired state. She didn't come as far as to die now. Death couldn't have been either of them. Lincoln, who'd been practically unconscious for the ride, he was jolted awake after Lynn made a sharp turn. Looking towards the front, he saw the rest of the Full House and his team waiting for them, just beyond the main door. Ushering Lynn in a hurry, unfortunately he had also made to bear witness to a flaming section of the roof began to collapse just above their only exit. Everyone else started screaming in terror as the roof began to fall towards the duo, and Lincoln could only watch in horror and merely feet from crushing him, and Lynn reached safety. Lincoln let out a sharp gasp as he bolted up in the straight way. A sweat drenched in his body, he took several deep, loud breaths. Upon recognizing the knights outside the line as it closed its door with next to the one leading the hallway, the loud closed his mouth and steadily breathing before laying back on the mattress. What was that? Lincoln asked himself, his breathing filling up the otherwise silent room. I know it was a dream. Certainly wasn't like a nightmare, or mostly, I don't even know what I would call it. He then twitched his fingers as left and right, bringing his cast up slightly to glance at it. I thought Lynn was going to make it end of how the others did, but she just didn't. Just like how I thought she was going to try something at lunch. Putting his cast down and staring at the ceiling, she didn't even try to save me when she could have just left me behind. Lincoln glanced at the clock to his nightstand. He gave a pretty much a half-idled stare. 4 in the morning, great. He shifted his bed until he sat up, rubbing his eyes. Man, my head's acting crazily. The boy yawned, swinging his feet over the edge before standing up. He then stretched until his joints felt his arms give a satisfying pops. Mom and Dad were gone, even though I knew they were fine at home. I even talked with them yesterday when they called. Lincoln then shuffled onto the floor, door opening it, glancing at both sides. Seems like none of the McBrides had been awoken by his screaming. Well, he didn't scream when he woke up, but the loud hope that it didn't in his sleep. He walked past Clyde's room, hearing muffled sound, how the nearly child, you'll pretty much talked in his sleep. Lincoln didn't pick up exactly what he was saying, but he could have sworn he uttered a classmate's name in a heavenly tone. Lincoln made it to the living room, flopping onto the couch and switched on the TV with the remote. Since he didn't go without sleep anytime soon, might as well pick up something other than staring at the ceiling till 6. The early morning news was shown didn't interest Lincoln even in the slightest, but the background noise did help him think. A frown had dawned on his face as he thought over everything that happened in his dream. In spite of the fact that it didn't end with his death, it left his brain swimming with the idea of sea of confusion. It didn't seem to have an end in sight. Part of Lincoln wished he didn't wake up so soon, but at the same time, he was too scared to find out what would happen next. It also didn't give him much of an answer of how much he could approach one of his siblings. He didn't wish to fight them, nor cause any trouble. I hope Dr. Lopez can explain this better when I talk to her next time, and I don't know which sister to pick. Lincoln scratched his hair, although she squinted her eyes and thought, if Lynn didn't do anything last time, then I just dreamed about her saving me. Lincoln raised a brow. That dream may have been onto something.